Welcome to the Partners Meeting, a weekly recap of Mad Men Season 7, Part 2, right here on the Bushell Review. My name is Aaron Hartung, and as always, I'm joined today by Joseph. How are you, Joseph?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Sean?
Hi.
And Katie.
Hello.
Last week, Peggy prohibited a pushy Pima from progressing, Horny Harry hounded a hapless Megan, and the dirty duo of Don and Diana discussed their dark dilemmas. But this week, the forecast says we have a new episode to talk about. Let me start off by saying I can't believe you three have the balls to come back after the way you embarrassed yourselves last week. Joseph, you scoffed when I said that creepy Glenn would return, and lo and behold, here he was.
I was surprised, and what a jawline that guy's got on him now.
And
holy
sideburns.
Cow.
He was a pudgy little kid.
He was
back in the day.
But even when he was a preteen, or what do they call it, young adolescent, he was a little pudgier.
He's grown up to a skinny man with hair on his chest.
He does have a lot of hair.
Yeah, he's got the kind of chest hair I wish I had.
As predicted, Matthew Weiner couldn't resist the chance to shoehorn in his son one last time. Not to be confused, of course, with Mark Weiner. But what did you think of seeing Glenn again, going to war, going to Vietnam?
I mean, I think it's just so great about the show that they have the storylines of the characters, and then they're able to work in these things that would have been real-world issues of people at the time. And I think, again, that's why people love the show so much, because, I mean, quite frankly, probably all of our fathers were eligible. I know my father was drafted, and then, he didn't go because he's deaf in one ear. So they were like, if you can't hear anything, you're probably going to die, so let's not do that to you. But I think that was sort of a great touch, and I think it was also great that Sally said that earlier in the show he was against it. And I think that just kind of shows the political climate of the time, that was a very controversial war. And
well, we learned the reason he probably still would be against it, but the reason he signs up is because he flunked out of college,
right,
and didn't want to reveal that. I think he said to his stepdad.
Well, I mean, it's all that pot that he was smoking. Obviously. Hey, you got some green? Like, who asked that? Was that his lady person?
His girlfriend.
Yeah, he had kind of like a new girlfriend there.
Did she say grass? I love it when
grass
call it grass.
You know, if we can score some grass.
Oh, we can get it at Funland. What the hell is Funland?
Chuck E. Cheese.
Chuck E. Cheese?
For the 70s.
18-year-old 70s.
18-year-old 70s Chuck E. Cheese.
So they just score grass and ride on the Ferris wheel and go wee for a long time.
There's a big ball pit.
But it's funny. Glenn's intention is only to get with Betty. Is why he keeps maybe in touch with Sally. Why he keeps coming back to their house. Why he keeps. Well, I can't. I mean, just what kind of unfolded with that was just kind of crazy because he asked for her hair at one point, and that was weird.
And
it was significantly creepy.
Yeah.
And we kind of hashed that out a little bit last week.
I poo-pooed you guys, and I apologize, because I thought that my comment last week made sense in that, sometimes young kids do things that when you get older they seem weird. But it seems like, Glenn is still the Glenn we knew.
But hold on, though. In defense of Glenn, once, because so much time has passed, Betty doesn't even recognize him. But once he sort of clarifies that to her and says who he is, the tone of her voice changes.
Oh, it was weird.
She sort of flirts with him a little bit. He says what university he's going to. She says, well, I'm going back to school too, actually.
Yeah.
And then there's those great shots of Sally looking up going, what is going on here?
But that's it's interesting because that's the second. I mean, we see that also. I think the one thing about this episode is that mirror effect between Don and Betty, and how actually similar they are. Because that's with Sally when he's taking Sally's friends out to dinner, and her friend is just being all weirdly flirtatious with him, and Don's just kind of going with it. But he explains, "Oh, I just didn't want to embarrass her." So it's kind of interesting. It was maybe almost in the same way the other way around too, where. Was Betty just naturally doing this thing and then didn't want to embarrass him in front of these other people, or is just going with the flow or something? Or...
I thought the episode had a strange, almost undercurrent of pedophilia. The way Don was talking to I think the friend's name was Sarah, Sally's friend.
Yeah.
And the way Betty was talking to Glenn, even though technically Glenn said he's 18 years old, so that wouldn't be the case. But it was very... just seemed inappropriate. Just didn't seem right.
But is that looking at it from our current standards? Because, I mean, my mom got married in the 70s at a fairly... I mean, I don't think it was so... I don't think it was something that people condoned, but I don't think it was so frowned upon to have young people be sexualized that young, you know?
Well, and I think Mad Men is the sort of television show that doesn't shy away from controversial things like that. You know, this idea of kind of sexualizing children. We've also seen, for example, episodes, Sally masturbating for the first time, Don getting slapped in the face when he's having sex. I mean, Mad Men's not the type of show that's going to shy away from that stuff. They've shown it to us before. What did you think about... I mean, did you think of anything else in terms of why they're doing this? Why they're showing adults flirting with really young people?
I mean, I think that it's a life... Like you said, they don't shy away from the life questions, and it's certainly not the first show. I remember watching 6 Feet Under, and later on in the season, the main character, he's got this old high school or grade school friend, and he's... They're at this birthday party of, I think, this guy's younger sister or daughter. I can't remember. But the friend creepily is drinking this beer and he's like, God, aren't they just so, like, they just look so perfect? And the main character of the 6 Feet Under was like, what are you talking about? And he goes, you just think about it. He goes, no, I don't think about it because they're children. That's freaking weird. But, I mean, I think that that's something... I remember I dated this girl once who would always look at younger guys and be like, that guy's going to grow up to be super handsome. I'm like, yeah, but right now he's still a child. So that's really creepy what you're doing. You know, I mean, the lines blur a little bit in thought. I think it's interesting the way that Sally is always... She was the odd man out of that whole interaction. And when I thought about it...
Both of them.
In both of them, yeah. And when I thought about it, she really kind of has been that way. Because when she talks to Don later on... She has been in this precarious position of both rebelling against her parents, but then also trying their skin on a little bit. Like when she smokes a little bit or kissing a boy. I just feel like this episode made me realize how unique her perspective is.
But it's also universal in a way, because we can all think of that trajectory where when you're a child, you look to your parents to sort of get a sense of how the world works and operates, but then when you become a teenager, you totally rebel against them, and you go, I'm not going to be like you, I'm going to be totally different, and the world is against me, and no one understands me, and I think they did a good job capturing that in that time period.
Yeah.
You know.
What does she really have to rebel against, though? Like, I'm going to be a prude, I'm not going to drink, I'm not going to have any kind of sexual encounters...
One thing that she definitely won't do is she won't be breaking all of the light bulbs in the hotel where she stays at when she goes.
We were misbehaving. We broke all the light bulbs in the hotel. That's just being an asshole, basically, because you're leaving like glass shards and darkness for people.
Glass shards and...
That was actually the name of my band in high school.
Yeah. Can you imagine the people? Why would they do this? There's just glass shards and darkness.
It was also interesting to me that she said everything to her dad that she couldn't say to her mom, whereas like her mom almost made she was more flirtatious with Glenn than like Don was with her friends, with Sally's friends. But Sally didn't feel comfortable or didn't want to talk to her mom, and she just said everything that she wanted to say to her mom to her dad.
Don seemed to be more reactionary in the conversation, too, I think. Because that girl was coming on to him so hard.
Yeah.
I mean, the other two were giggling at everything he said, too.
Yeah.
But that particular girl, though, the Sarah girl, was definitely, so where do you live? What's your home? Like, it just seemed a little...
Ooh, a penthouse.
But here's the thing is that instead of giving her really curt, short answers, Don was indulging it.
Yeah. But he was trying to spread the conversation around on the table... And he just seems, that's when he's social, he's just a jokey kind of guy, which is fine. I mean, I think you just notice his sharp reactions all around, unless he's like emotionally distraught or hungover or just not in the mood for it. I mean, you know, he wears a bunch of masks, right? We know that. He like switches on and off to be whatever he needs to be in the situation. In that case, it's like he's just having dinner with his daughter's friends, and one's being real, like, affectionate. Yeah.
Paternal. I feel like that was the most we've ever seen him paternal. And he, of course, does the shitty thing, which you both groaned at, where it's like, so where do you girls see yourself in the future? And you're like, Don, you're just trying to, pull the idea off of anyone.
Yeah.
For what he was going to write about it. That's what it... But...
let's talk about that a little bit. So Roger is going to the Bahamas. He has to make a speech. McCann's like, look, you got to give a speech. Tries to pass it off on Ted. Ted does the brilliant move where he says, Don really knows how to paint a picture, which is great. So then Don's stuck doing it. I like how he undersells it by saying it's got to be kind of like the Gettysburg Address, like one of the most famous speeches in American history. What did you think of Roger giving this task to Don, and Don immediately not knowing what to do? He asked Ted, he goes, Ted, what would you want to do? Like, how would you see the future? And he gets sort of his ideas. And Ted says, oil company, pharmaceutical. Don's sort of like, okay, whatever. Then Peggy, coming in for what she thinks is her performance review, Don again sees this opportunity where he's like, what do you see in the future here? And she's like, wait, was that part of the performance review? And he's like, well, I'm kind of going off script here. She says she wants to be the first female creative director, be famous by making a catchphrase. Don, again, not pleased with all of these answers, and it's almost like there's a bigger question where Roger asking him to write, I'm assuming this is how the episode gets its title, The Forecast, to write a speech about the forecast of the business, and Don sort of realizing after you keep accomplishing another step in the business world, I mean, how far do you go? I mean, where does it end? What's the end goal? What's the point? And he sort of had this kind of, it seemed like he was going through this sort of realization thing of, what do I want out of life? Because all of the suggestions that he received, he didn't seem very impressed by. He's like, oh, you just want another big account. Okay.
Well, I think it's similar to, like, what Sally's figuring out is, like, her future. And he should have figured it out a long time ago. But he is turning, like, the speech that he has to make or prepare into, like you said, the bigger question. And it's just something that he should have figured out before.
I mean, I think he's trying to mine I feel like there's been examples in the past where he tries to ask or figure things out through other people. Like, I think the first episode where he does the Lucky Strike thing, that's basically, he asks that bartender, right, the waiter, in the first episode, like,
why do you like Lucky Strike?
Yeah.
Like, why do you not choose a different cigarette?
And so he always that's how he works. He uses other people's kind of generated ideas and then formulate something together. Like, I just think he's the type to kind of see all the perspectives as possible and then mash them together to make this one super thing that'll just sell it. And you saw that the example against that was Mathis, who just went to Don, didn't ask everyone else's advice, then used it, and then basically fires himself because he was an idiot. He didn't
correctly use Don's advice. I think Don did give him good advice, which was
make a joke.
Make a joke, make light of it, but sort of at your own expense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the joke that he used was a joke that only worked in Don's specific story.
Yeah.
Because, like, if he delivered it like that, that's funny.
Right.
But being delivered from Mathis, especially because Mathis was in trouble for using strong language.
Yeah.
So then to say, like, you don't have the ball, like, why do you have the balls to be here? It's like, okay, well, you're doing it again.
Yeah.
And Mathis is no Don Draper, so he can never accomplish anything.
Yeah. I think it's funny that he became one of the more prominent creative writers because he's such a... I mean, Ginsberg at least had...
dud.
He was quirky.
Hey, one tink and you're hooked.
But, who knows if Matthew Weiner created this plot line so that way Don could ask himself that question. But I thought it was interesting because we mentioned in one of the previous episodes that Katie said that you don't think that Don is after wealth. And I thought it was interesting that when he talks to Ted and then when he talks to Peggy, and they mention getting that big client or making a catchphrase, his response is, so that's it? That's all you want is fame? He seems completely not content with that answer for himself, and maybe also for the speech. So then it just begs the question, like, Don, what did you?
Yeah, what's
did
your
you want
answer?
out of all this?
Yeah. And I think Peggy gives him a good line when she's like, "Why don't you give me your dreams so I can shit on it?"
Yeah.
And then just storms out of the room, which was great.
Yeah. But also, it was interesting, too, when he was talking to Sally's friends, and they said, so you wanted to be in advertising? And he said, I didn't know what advertising was. All I knew is I wanted to be in New York City. And so it kind of alluded to the idea that, again, like, he doesn't seem like he has it figured out for himself what he wants.
What did everyone think of? There were a couple of moments in the episode where Don was kind of playing the father role figure to the feuding children, they being Pete and Peggy.
Yeah.
There were a couple of moments like when Pete runs up and Peggy kind of like heads it off and says, "Don't you talk to Don." What are you saying, Pete? And then then what does Pete say? He says, I could fire you, Peggy, right now. And Don's just like, settle down. Settle down. We're not going to fire anybody here. It was kind of fun to watch that dynamic of Don having to diffuse the situation.
But it's like not only that one, it's like weird situation between her and I can't come up with his name right now. The guy who's always against Don, or
Lou Avery?
No, the other creative exec.
Ted
Shaw?
Yeah, Ted Shaw. Yeah, sorry. But he has to mediate between Peggy and Ted. He has to mediate between Peggy and Pete. Just kind of, it was, I guess I found it interesting in that meeting when he was doing the performance review that Peggy, I was really curious, like, what Peggy's thing was, like, leaving a legacy is her biggest thing, right? That's her goal. And, like, that's why she wants to reach to the top and accomplish so much. And, like, what kind of weird things are in her way and what kind of things that, honestly, I feel like it's, like, going to be going, maybe predicting the end a little bit, like, Dawn's going to leave and she's going to kind of come into that position. It just kind of, I feel like
she did say,
yeah.
Was it foreshadowing that
yeah.
she wants to be the first, I think she says the first woman creative director.
And that sounds like it's a really kind of a slightly satisfying ending to it too, is like if she eventually moves into that partner top creative role that, and with, I could see Dawn fully supporting that and being like, because out of any relationship, theirs is like one of the more interesting ones because it is
one of the strongest, maybe, too, on the show.
And part of it is because he is rough with her and he is mean and he kind of just blares out the truth of what he thinks at her and doesn't even care, or like maybe he thinks it's beneficial. And because people aren't nice, and it is kind of New York, and I think that's the attitude of maybe what you discover about it is like, it's rough. People are honest. They're gonna tell it to you straight, and you better have a tough skin to take it. And if you don't, then why are you there? And that's maybe Peggy too. It's like kind of been given a lot of opportunity through Dawn the whole series.
Definitely, Dawn has helped advance her career a lot, but that's because she's proven that she can take those steps.
Yeah,
every extra responsibility that she's been given, she's always delivered on it. So Don knows that he can count on her.
That's why he wanted her to do her own performance review.
Yeah, right.
No, it was Ted who wanted her to do.
They both did.
No, because Ted didn't want to talk to her.
Ted,
that's true.
Ted wanted her to write her own, and then she was like, "This isn't working. Don, you give it to me. Give it to me straight."
But like, how do you do your own performance reviews? I always have trouble with that kind of crap because of like, it's because what do? You just like try to like.
In 2015, Sean was the greatest employee of all time.
But it's, personally, I have a lot of trouble doing performance reviews for work or self reviews, and it's just like I think I understand where she's coming from because you don't always feel like you have the best perspective on yourself, and like who else then like maybe perceived like the most creative mind in the office to give like what you can do better at, because it's obviously I think that's one thing that Peggy looks to for Don is like, oh, Don's really great for some reasons, and maybe I can learn a lot, and if he tells me how to do better, I can. And that, I think there's been a lot of moments through the whole series where that has happened, and she kind of, she's just gaining more confidence like, every season, and that's kind of one of the, I think, exciting things is seeing Peggy's like growth from like being a lowly secretary who just like, well, she finished secretarial school and then became Don's secretary, and then moving from there to where she is now. It's kind of like one of the reasons to keep watching the show.
Oh, definitely. I mean, aside from, I would say arguably, if you take Don out and ask the question, who's the most important character on the show, I think it's Peggy. I think Peggy's number 2.
But then with that, because we've been talking about Don, that's you bring up a good point in that throughout the series, she is still constantly looking for Don's approval. And so if we were to speculate as to what her character arc is by the end, it seems like there's still a he's on a pedestal, and there's still a little bit of a power dynamic because in the last season, for when they landed on the moon, doesn't Don have a kind of a talk with her where he's like, "You got this, you can do it, this is you," and she looks like she really soaks it up. She just drinks it up because she somehow believes him. What happens to her? I mean, if she is to achieve this goal, by the end of the series, is there going to be a point where she suddenly doesn't need Don's approval anymore?
I think, though, I could totally see her achieving the goal, but part of the reason she achieves the goal is because there isn't a creative director because Don has left. I could see that happening. Don leaving and then her
like
taking
she has to
his
figure
position.
out everything on her own.
Yeah.
She doesn't have a mentor
But
to
that's,
check in with all the time.
I think that's what we're gaining to, is like, maybe she's done. It's time to pass on the crown in a way, and time to, for him to move on and for her to move up, and it'll be, that just seems like the predictable ending now to come, is that we know that Don will maybe just disappear or something, or whatever. We'll see. I mean, I think everyone wants to predict what's going to happen to Don, but I honestly think probably nothing. And he'll just, like, vanish somehow. Mysteriously in, mysteriously out. But Peggy, I think, will have, like, she's now the head, and she's going to be, it's the more, like, you want to know what she's going to accumulate to, but at the same time, it's going to be one of those endings that ends just, okay, cool. There's all this speculation what she can do, what she's going to do, but we don't really need to know. We just know that it's like her story now, and that's it.
Perhaps, like Sheryl Sandberg, Peggy will lean in.
Now, a question along those lines is that with the end of the show looming, there's always talk about at the end of a show, what are they going to do with The Sopranos? It was that big surprising ending, and people were upset about it. They thought it was okay, whatever. I'd never seen Lost, but people seemed very upset. I guess it was a dream or something. Spoiler alert.
No.
It wasn't? Okay, well, whatever it was.
They were all dead.
Yeah. People were very upset.
They were sort of in purgatory.
Purgatory. People were very upset about that. Some people thought that Breaking Bad's ending was a little lackluster, but yet appropriate. Do you think that Matthew Weiner, he sees where it is now? Is it like a musical chord where you go from, and forgive my lack of musical knowledge, I haven't taken theory since like freshman year of college, but is it like first, third, fifth minor resolution? And do they find where it's like, you know what? We're just going to take, things are moving to a place, and it might be a little anticlimactic, but it will resonate in a harmonious chord in the last note? Or did they try to throw something really dissonant and shock you? I mean, what would feel, and not to say that they bring it to a happy ending, but pieces are moving. Do you think that they disrupt them to create a shocking ending, or do you think that they just let
Give an example of a disruption.
Like, a disruption to me would be sort of the ending of The Sopranos, where you're like, what?
Well, I
don't think
that'll happen. Yeah,
no, but I mean, like a disruption,
sort of
like
somebody dies.
Yeah, like Roger dies and Don becomes the head, and Peggy, and in a way that's coming to harmony, but or Don, kills himself. Something shocking. Or do they just say, like, this is the way that the stories are going, and instead of jumping the stories to get to an ending point, wherever they end in that final episode is where the ending will be, and it will be it would make sense to the viewer who has watched this slow but steady transition through all the characters.
I think it would almost be impossible to not have a continuation feeling when the show's done, though. Because when I watch this show, I feel like I'm getting a glimpse into these characters' lives. And I know, and I have this feeling that once the show ends, in your head, they keep going. They keep working at the advertising agency. We're just not going to see it anymore. It's not like everyone's going to leave or everyone's going to be done, or sort of, to use the example you just brought up, like Breaking Bad. I mean, that is a bookend. That's over.
Right.
He's dead. They avenged the deaths. It's all finished. There isn't that sort of linear narrative that needs to be solved.
And that's what I mean, is that he might just, it's like when you hit, again, to go back to a musical analogy, when you hit the last key of a piano and you let it just kind of hum and resonate until it just fades out into nothing. Is it going to be like that? Or is it going to be like, bop, 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 and then done? And you're like, oh!
So you're saying it's going to be like the Beatles' A Day in the Life?
Essentially.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it would have to go that way, that maybe we don't get resolution on these characters, but in a way it just kind of blends into, like you said, nothingness, because the show will end.
Speaking of resolution with characters, we did get Glenn closure. Now, in the first episode we discussed, will we ever
Glenn
see...
Close, is that what you're thinking? Glenn Closure.
Glenn Closure.
Glenn Closure. Glenn Bishop Closure. But as we discussed in the first episode, I think we all agreed, we all predicted we wouldn't see Lou Avery again. But again, here's Lou Avery. Lou Avery popped up. He's been shipped off to California, running the Los Angeles branch. He's trying to schlep Scout's honor to Hanna-Barbera.
He has nothing else. He's not a creative
Who
director.
did the cartoons go to and they laughed at him? Basically, Stan Rizzo copied the cartoons.
Use the Xerox machine.
And Ginter.
Yeah, and everyone's laughing at him and stuff.
I liked how Dee, the California secretary, described it as Gomer Pyle, but it's a monkey. That was the pitch to Hanna-Barbera. That's how they did it.
Oh man, but Lou, I just see him and it's like, this guy's awful. I just hated him ever since he was introduced into the show, and like I forgot that, the agency even hired him. Who hired him? The guy,
Jim Cutler.
Yeah, Jim Cutler. And now he's in LA in their LA office, and just kind of the whole point for him, he probably pitched himself to go out to just to sell this dumb cartoon to Hanna-Barbera.
Well, the bigger story of what was going on in Los Angeles, Joan goes out there and then sort of meets this mysterious man.
Debonair.
I love the line, he thinks he's seeing his optometrist and sort of just goes along with pretending to be, I think it was like Jim McLeod. And he was like, look, honey, when a lady like you talks to me, I mean, I'm just going to roll with it. I'm sorry.
He said something about not being blind or something, didn't he?
Oh, I think the line was, I may be nearsighted, but I'm not blind.
Oh, God. The worst.
Yeah, it's all these weird rehashed lines. And then on top of that, their relationship is moving very fast. Oh, you have a kid.
If you do say so yourself.
Oh, you have a kid. I don't know if I can do this again. It's like, you just slept once. You've met maybe for 24 hours tops in a period of time, and half of that was probably sleeping. And
as half of our lives is also sleeping.
But he's already oh man, maybe I'm gonna be in a more serious relationship with this. I guess it's kind of cute that they're thinking about that kind of future. But I feel I
kind of like that guy. At first, he was sort of
I'm not saying it's
strange
not likable.
That he used kind of deception to meet someone, but he was very forthcoming about what he wanted.
Yeah.
He was sort of a jerk to her, but then apologized in what seemed to be a very genuine way.
But the apology is I don't want to see your son. I want to meet your mother. Just kind of really jumping it. But I guess.
But I think that's probably due to his age, right?
Yeah,
when you're at that stage in your life, you probably don't want to do the whole let's date for 3 years before we figure out if we want to be together. He's probably thinking in his head okay, I can kind of piece this together right now.
I would love to know the opinions of older people that are listening to this. If they're oh, he's totally right. Or if they're that kid doesn't know what the hell he's talking about.
I mean, I guess now that you mention it, maybe he's just oh, I'm going to be dead soon. I better ride this lightning into
No,
no,
I
not
agree.
gonna
I
do
think
it.
he's a sleazeball.
I think. Oh man,
You think he's a sleazeball?
Why did you think he was a sleazeball?
His
The ascot.
ascot and his
His God.
clothing and his...
So you're blaming
Yes,
the
I am.
decade on him.
Yes.
You're blaming...
No, but
the
his
fashion
creepy,
sense.
his lines were all creepy too.
His lines were creepy.
And they kind of maybe like in a way. Okay, I don't want to like to really go. Oh, maybe he's still faking it, and he's not really who he says he is. Maybe he's just some weird actor person who's like pretending all these things.
What? Just because I'm an actor doesn't mean we're all weird and perverted, although most of us are.
I mean, he drops those lines that seem like, oh man, I'm ready to go, just in case we meet somebody.
Like, he flip-flops so fast. He's like,
Yeah.
I can't do this. And then he's like, please, come to my house.
Yeah.
I will meet your family. Like, immediately, from one night to the next.
By the way,
You're pulling me around here.
You know that was a mistake because obviously he's never met Joan's mother before. I don't think he knows what he's in.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing, I have to say, though, that it was great because I think that's the first time I had ever seen Joan with a man, and it felt like she was actually getting something out of it. I mean, with Roger, it was always kind of like he was taking, and with her husband, he very much was taking in various circumstances. But
Dr. Rape.
Dr. Rape, he was very
Oh.
rapey.
God, he's the worst.
Good-looking guy.
By
Why
the
is
way,
he Dr. Rape?
big revelation that happens in the episode when they're discussing, have you ever been married before? Joan says, I've been divorced twice. Who's the other person?
I don't know.
I think it's like implied that she was married before the series started.
Right,
Yeah.
but that's a big revelation to be learning now.
It was
That-
like she
that's-
explains it at some point. I think it was like she was really, really young, like 18, and she got married with like her whatever sweetheart or whatever at the time. And
Okay.
like, oh, it's too fast, and she probably had to get. I think if I remember correctly, she had an abortion in that relationship. Right? Is that
She
something?
had like at least 2 or maybe 3 abortions.
Yeah, because doesn't she advise Peggy when...
Yeah. Call this number.
Wasn't that Claire from House of Cards?
What?
Oh.
Oh, I was
Yeah,
referencing
maybe you're right.
the multiple abortions.
Oh, yeah, that's right. She has 2. She has 2 in that.
I think she says she has 3. Anyways, that's
Yeah.
neither here nor
They're
there.
the
But
same
it
character,
was
I
nice to see. It was nice to see Joan kind of win one. I mean, whatever this guy turns out to be, But
Scumbag.
when
Just wait till Roger meets this guy.
oh, that's going to be amazing. Though.
Just wait till.
Can you imagine them
Roger
having
meets this dude.
a line off, just like, well, But it was just nice to see it because, like, with Roger, and I don't know, she just never seems like she also got something out of the person she was with.
Joan is serious about someone when she's taking her earring off to receive the phone.
That's
I
an,
think
That's how you know it's an important.
I think that's
phone
just
call.
a practical thing.
that's an intimate gesture. She
No.
wants her ear up against that phone.
Are you
I-
being serious?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I would think
I
so.
don't know.
No,
Like,
I think you just did that in the day.
No, of course
Yeah,
you did that, but like
those earrings are gigantic and like looked uncomfortable.
visually, it looks like an intimate gesture, and not in necessarily
Yeah.
a sexual way, but visually, when she takes that off, because I imagine there's plenty of people that she's just dinging that earring up against the phone, and they're
Yeah.
like, "What is rattling?" I think it was just intimate to watch her take that off, kind of coyly, and put it up against skin against phone.
Well,
But she kind of
and she has her own office now because remember the last time she did that, or the last time we saw her do that, I think she was in Ken Cosgrove's office and left the earring there. Because remember he was like, "Hey, stop using my office to make phone calls."
I think it was just a practical move because Joan is just like that. I think everything she does is kind of like, I don't know, sultry is the right word or something, but you just get, like, she does have a way of moving, and it probably is directed to do so, is to kind of have that, like, smoothness to it, or, like, how she takes her earring off just to answer the phone, how she walks, how she, like, holds herself, how she rolls on top of that dude in the bed, I guess. I don't know. Just, like, everything she does has this, like, I think
meaning and purpose.
Yeah, meaning and purpose, and like her own physicality is just like a big part of her character and how she holds herself. It started from I think season 1, and then it only has gotten like more intentional and probably more like if you notice, they probably have all the characters probably do have more like specific actions and like what they do and how they hold themselves. Or someone has a shoulder roll when you see them all the time, just to cue you in on who they are, a character, without like them talking or anything, right?
But I do think you're right. I think Claire and Joan do have a lot of overlap in their characters, not just because they've both had abortions.
This is why we need to do the House of Mad Men
Yes.
overlap podcast episode.
House of Mad
They
Men
are very
cards?
similar in a lot of ways. Anyway.
House of
You
Man,
can-
House of Man cards.
House of Mad.
Yeah, that one.
Cards of
Humanity.
Madhouse card.
Sterling Cooper Draper Underwood.
I like
Yeah.
that. I like that. Are you going to ask a question about when she says, "You're ruining my life"? When Joan says that, did you have anything written down about that?
How about you ask that question right now?
Well, I didn't want to, but I thought that was significant. I thought it was significant when Joan says that because
To the babysitter. Why
To the
would you say?
babysitter.
Why would you say that to the
But then
babysitter?
my question was it to the babysitter? Because then when that adorable frickin' kid says,
Kevin.
"I love you, mommy," it seemed like it shook her more than just, "Oh, my beautiful boy said I love you." It made me think, did she direct that?
Well, because she
A
says
little-
it to the babysitter while the babysitter's holding him.
Holding him.
Yeah.
And, what did she say to that guy? She said something about like, I'm living I have the job I've always wanted or something like that. I never thought I'd get. And then...
Although she says that, though, because prior to that, he asks her, "Do you have any mouths to feed?" And she says no.
Right.
Meaning, do you have any kids, I'm assuming.
So then it made me think when she said, "You're ruining my life," and then he says, "Oh, God, melts your heart. I love you, mommy." And she looks like she's really rattled by that. It makes you wonder, is she suddenly having second thoughts? I mean, does she suddenly wish she was not tethered?
So, this is how I perceived the scene where Richard comes to apologize to Joan. He says, "Hey, I screwed up. I'm really sorry." And then she says, kind of in a different voice, "I've decided I just want you. I've decided I'm going to send my son away." But I thought that was a psychological thing to see if he would go, "Yes, thank you." And then if he did do that, she would know, "Don't be with this person." But he didn't say that.
Yeah.
Instead, he said, "Don't do that. I screwed up. I want that boy to be part of my life too." And then I think that took her aback because she was like, "Wait a second, this person didn't bite on that line that I'd sort of planned for them." That's how I saw that.
Yeah, I thought she was just
Did
fucking
you?
with him.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
thought too.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that the question. I mean, I think that you have that, like you say that with newborn babies, that their mothers go through a depressed period where they resent. I don't know if there's a term for it, but they resent
Postpartum.
Yeah, they resent specifically their child. They have a resentment towards it, and I've heard people mention it and talk about it, and there's such a guilt. And so the thing is that do I ever think that she was going to leave her kid? No, but again, like Mad Men does, it showed us that real moment where maybe she really did have a moment of, the things where I am, the things I could have done if I didn't have a kid, the things where could I go? And I thought it was it was a powerful little nugget.
Man, that babysitter has to put up with a lot.
Oh God!
But think about all of the one-liners that baby's going to deliver with it. Because that's Roger's.
That's Roger's baby.
That's Roger's kid. That's got some Sterling DNA.
That's how I want the show to end. I want the show to cut to him with his tiny little voice and being like, "We got a Napoleon and this and that with this plate. We gotta go for Europe." Or remember when he
Just
says
imagine
that?
the little baby going like, "When God closes a door, He opens up a pair of legs."
Yeah. Oh my God! I hope that's how it ends.
This is an awful ending.
This baby
The
drinking.
final scene.
Yeah.
What did everyone think of how the episode started? Initially, I was kind of taken aback. I was like, what is Betty doing in Don's apartment? Like, what's going on? I think they shot it intentionally that way because the camera was sort of pulled back, and then only does the real estate agent step into focus, and you realize, oh, this is a different person. Don trying to sell his apartment. It was sort of interesting because, obviously, when you're selling an apartment, there's kind of an advertising that goes into it, except it's very much more visual because you're there seeing the product right in the moment. And Don kind of has some interesting discussions with the woman who's selling it because she's not doing it very well, in his opinion. She's like, well, you're not giving me a whole lot to work with here, what with the wine stains and the lack of furniture.
I was wondering if that was part of how she sold it, because he basically delivers her a line, like, just say it like this, and then, like...
In that classic Don Draper way.
And then the next, like, that was the one scene, and then we see a bunch of the show, and then being the final scene of the show, that's when he comes in, and it's like, oh, they're signing now. Oh, I better get out of here. But I feel like she totally probably used that, and because he's like, look, you can just imagine anything you want, and that's for your benefit to do, and that's what he's been basically preaching the whole show is like just plant it in their brain and let them do all the work.
So what do we think of? She tells him right at the end, 30-day escrow. You need to find a new place to move in 30 days. We only have, 4 episodes of the show left? Does Don maybe decide to move, but move to someplace that's not New York City?
But you see his face after they close the door. His face went from kind of a classic Don look to, I thought, legitimately terrified. He had a look of alarm on his face of like, what do I do now? And one of you had mentioned in the last show about how Don covers things up by just covering up that wine stain, and he still hasn't taken care of it. And I thought maybe the apartment was a great metaphor for what we're all wondering, which is, she's like, I can't sell this because it looks sad, it looks depressing. And he's like, a lot of happy things have happened here. And your response there was like, nothing happy has happened there.
That's what I wanted to ask. Let's try to figure out very quickly. You mentioned Zou Bisou.
Love Zou Bisou.
Yes.
Zou Bisou was a great moment.
Zou Bisou was so great.
Aside from Zou Bisou, what great things have happened in that apartment?
I mean, he's probably had lots of sex.
Probably the sex.
Lots of sex. But was it great or was it just sad and kind of depressing?
I guess we'd have to ask
Well,
Megan.
I think it was a very different home from what he had with Betty, and just in terms of location and the setup and how it was decorated. I think that's, at the time, it was a huge change that kind of was indicative of his relationship change and his personality change from, a suburban dad who just...
to a cosmopolitan man who lives in the city.
Yeah.
I mean, he used to live, he used to have to take the train after work to get home because he was way out in the middle of nowhere.
The honeymoon period of his relationship with Megan, I think that was great for him in a lot of ways, especially, obviously, before she moved to California.
But also in a lot of ways, not so great, because it seemed to happen after the Zou Bisou, it tainted it for him somehow, because I felt in a lot of scenes where they were seemingly very domestic, he seemed a little resigned already. And I mean, we all thought, oh, it must be going well because he's not sleeping around on her, and he is coming home every night. But there was a little less pizzazz from Don as when he's, maybe hooking up with another lady on the side. It was just kind of like, he's like, what do you want for dinner? And he's like, I don't, it's all right. I don't need to eat, I mean, not to say that he wasn't happy, but just it had a tinge, I thought, of like, ooh, you like to think it's happy, but it doesn't look really happy. What?
When you did the really happy. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, so it seems like the apartment is, it's like a metaphor. But then that just goes back to who is Don Draper and where does he go? Because the whole time it's like he's trying to fill in who he is.
I'm actually, like, when he walked out the door from his apartment, I actually got, like, really sick of him. I'm like, okay, we've heard this friggin' story, like, so many times. It's like, I know that you have problems in your life, and I know that you need to figure shit out, but, like, figure it out. Yeah. I just got, like irritated with his character all of a sudden.
And he looks like a lost puppy, too, and you're like, no, stop it. You've been here before.
You've been here so many times before. You're how old? And your daughter is way more mature than you, so get your shit together.
I like it. Yeah.
Strap in.
There's fire from this side of the table.
Well, but, like, that was the, when he drops that line of advice for his daughter, though. I mean, it's just like I thought it was really sweet that how he said it. She's about to get on the bus. She's super frustrated. She obviously saw him like cheating on Megan with Susan Rosenberg, a few scenes before. And
Sylvia.
Yeah, Sylvia. Really affected her. in a lot of ways. She doesn't trust him at all, but he knows it all, and all he says is like, yeah, you have our qualities too, but you can be better than both of us.
Think about Sally. She's walked in on her father having sex with someone who's not her father's wife. She's also seen Roger be filleted by Megan's mom at that
dinner
party. I mean, she's been exposed and walked in on
girl.
So many traumatic things.
Mm-hmm.
That's why AMC should do a spin-off.
The Sally Show.
The Sally Show, how she just goes through therapy. Sally going through therapy.
But
telling her therapist all the things she has seen.
I thought that was a great thing too, where
in the 80s,
where he says to her, I mean, because that's every parent's hope, is that you are us, but hopefully you'll be better. My parents always said, we tried our best to give you a better life than what we had. And then when I get older, and I'm like, well, there's a couple downfalls there. But then you look back at their life, and it's like, wow, they really did make up. And it was just, the series. So it's like, she could be better, but I think that the thing that chagrins every person is when you look at my brother. He teases me all the time, where he's like, you eat a lot of cough drops. You know who else eats a lot of cough drops? Dad. It's like, you sniff a lot, like, you know who else does that? Dad. I'm like, oh my God, I'm becoming them, and I'm not even doing anything. I'm just living, and I'm becoming my parents.
I think what he seemed to imply is like, things seem to come easy for them, maybe. I mean, this was post-Mathis blow up in his office, getting fired stuff, just like, yeah, because you're handsome, that's why it's easy. And he's like, no, we all have our problems and blah, blah, blah. It's like, how we cover them up is how we function. But just kind of, I think what he was maybe reflecting on is like, maybe it is just like, there's something else there that Sally kind of possesses, like a further intelligence, or like noticing that she has about her surroundings that may put her at like an advantage over just regular people. So,
because there were times where I was a little worried about Sally. There's definitely a point in the show where she starts to dress a little bit more scantily clad, and it seems like she's trying to emulate somehow Betty, or dress adult like Betty.
I thought she was trying to dress like Megan.
Like Megan.
Because Megan would buy the stuff for her, and then Betty would say, where did you get this stuff? Who's this person? Because Megan was less of a maternal figure, and I think more of a older sister friend to her.
But it's interesting because you see her try those things on, the high boots and the short skirt, but then in this last episode, she's in what I assume to be normal, 15, 16 teenage clothes for that time. So it's just interesting to see her try all these things on that she's exposed to, and then she makes decisions about them, and who knows what that will do later on.
What did we make of the revelation that Mathis shares, which is, according to Roger's version of the Don making a mistake in front of the Lucky Strike people, the only reason they wanted Don back was so that Lee Garner Jr. could imagine jacking him off. A pretty great line.
Yeah.
What did we think about that? Because that's, if you remember, that's the same character who propositions Sal, and Sal shoots him down, and Sal gets fired as a result of it. Lee Gardner Jr., we find out, still wreaking havoc, even though we haven't seen him on screen in probably 3 seasons.
I think Roger's just using one of his lines. I think he's just retelling the story the way he wants people to hear it. But
it made me wonder, because when Mathis comes in and asks Don for advice, he maybe says something along the lines of like, yeah, you can say that. He's like, I don't know, make something up. And it made me wonder, is it because Don is just really good looking, or is it because he's just really cool? Or was it like Don said, like, I solve my own problems? It's like, but do you? I mean, which one are you? Are you the full package where you're a good-looking, cool guy who can solve his own problems, or are you one or the other, and Mathis is actually onto something, where he's like, you're just a handsome guy who people fall in love with, and that's why you're successful?
I think we've seen time and time again that Don is smart, and he's observant, and he's creative. Like, I mean, his character is constructed that way, and he comes up with a lot of great ideas, and he's witty and sharp, and like all qualities that Mathis seems to lack, especially because he does just like take the line and just spit it out.
I think Mathis is supposed to represent Dick Whitman talking to Don Draper. Like,
An explosion.
Interesting.
Keep going.
Okay.
That's all I've got. But I mean, he's so not Don Draper in so many ways. In a lot of ways.
He seems sort of simple, let's say. The character is kind of constructed
it's almost
that
like
way.
that whole part with Mathis was constructed in order for them to have that interaction, in order for him to almost be confronted with Dick Whitman.
Well, we've never seen him show this much emotion before. The Mathis character is usually pretty even keel, and then he really blows up. I think really he just couldn't get along with Ed. Those two, it was like Lennon McCartney. They were just button heads and it wasn't working out.
I like that though because at the very end, Mathis gives a line where he said, "You told me to say this. I just wanted to apologize. That's what I wanted to do." And then Don's like, "Okay, well, blah, 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 you're fired." And he goes, "Well, I guess I came in here knowing that, but I knew that I shouldn't apologize for it." And walked out, which is sort of like, I know what I'm doing right now is right. That makes it interesting if that's true. If that is a metaphor for the Dick Whitman character.
Will Dick Whitman kill off Don Draper by the end of the show?
That would be like a Jekyll and Hyde scene where he's strangling himself and it's like, "You'll never win! I already have won! You shouldn't!"
Black Swan, like Black Swan.
Like Black Swan. Wings come out of him, he joins the ballet.
Yeah.
I think it's a great ending.
Well, going back to, Don needs to move somewhere. I always felt that this show has been building to, not always, but sometimes, building to Don turning back into Dick Whitman and moving to California. Because in New York City, he can really only exist as Don Draper. Mm-hmm. But as the Dick Whitman character, I think he can go back to that when he goes back to the rundown brothel he was raised in. If he were to go back to the farm he grew up on in rural Pennsylvania, or when he seems his most happy, back when Anna Draper was alive, way out in California. But does anyone, or am I the only person who sees that possibility?
No, I feel like that would be the only way for him to negotiate his whole self. Like, he can't just keep going the way he's going, obviously. We've been shown that, many times. So it's just a matter of time.
What is the Jekyll and Hyde moment? Because you're right.
You just described it.
No, right. I know.
And actually,
it's a great musical.
It's a shame because the people listening didn't get the visual. Yeah. Which was you shaking your head.
No, but you're right. When he was when Anna Draper was alive, to me that was one of the times that he seemed most content throughout the show. And I couldn't tell if it's because she accepted him for whoever he was, or if it's because she was one of the few people that had any conception of who he was as Dick Whitman, And so what is the Jekyll and Hyde moment in that? Where's the moment, if that happens, where Dick Whitman says, "I need to lay Don Draper to rest and be this other thing"?
To tie it back, we've already discussed House of Cards. To tie it back to a different television show, maybe a la Larry David and Curb Your Enthusiasm, he gets some grass from Glenn, smokes it up, and then looks in the mirror and says, "What is wrong with you? What? You're an idiot. Why do you keep doing this?" And just freaks out in front of a mirror. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's how it's going to end.
What show did that happen in?
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Spoiler alert.
Well, speaking of which, I just read, we don't have to record this necessarily, but in the New York Times, they just did this, what is an expose? When people say that, what does that mean?
Like a detailed investigative article that reveals something.
Okay, maybe it wasn't
like a really in-depth article.
But it was a big article that took up, a good page of the Times about the guy who first loaned out his apartment, where I think the artist was in the first season, the female artist that he hooks up with. And they were just talking about...
Midge.
Wait.
Yes.
That wasn't a set?
No, that was a guy's apartment in New York, and apparently he has this nice apartment. It has a lot of history. I can't remember. I think Ray Charles lived there, and the Rolling Stones practiced in the lobby. It has a lot of history in New York, and they were saying about how I guess you can just do this. You can sort of put it out there as a set. If you like my apartment, come shoot. Huh. And I guess he did one other thing, and then Mad Men came, and he of course had no idea what it was, and they gutted it, and they're like, "Look, we'll put everything back, but we need to gut it because it's too modern." And he had this great thing where he's like, "I remember seeing John Hamm, and I thought, what a shame, he's too handsome to be an actor." Of course, I never said that to him, but I was like, what a great thing that John Hamm could read now. It's like, too handsome to be an actor. It's pretty cool. But I just read that in the Times.
That's funny.
It just reminds me. I guess I'm thinking about maybe more ghosts will show up in Don Draper. I guess Midge can't because she's dead, but...
Is she dead?
Wait, is Midge dead?
Did she like heroin overdose in like the previous?
Oh, well, she was.
No, I don't
super
think she
addicted.
overdosed. I think she,
She's just an addict.
essentially offered her body up to Don for money, and then he was just like, "I'm out of here."
What if either Anna Draper or we saw a lot of times in the first few seasons one or both of his parents? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they had some sort of a.
We saw Anna Draper though because after she died, Don had a vision of her. It would be strange, I think, to have another vision years later. I don't know.
I'm just waiting for another like episode where they throw it back to his childhood, where he's running around the whorehouse and stuff.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Well, they just hint at that, or hint at when he was on the farm, and when we're seeing his real dad and stuff, chasing away a hobo, and it's like. I feel like we're due to have one of those kind of moments soon, you know, or it won't happen and we'll continue on.
Or, like another TV show, maybe he goes to his dad's grave and relieves himself.
I have an idea of how this show's going to end. The show's going to end, and we're going to see that it's actually been a dream.
No.
Inside Kevin's head, Joan's son... And the horse that Kevin's been dreaming of that's been giving him a nightmare is the same horse that kicks Dick Whitman's dad in the head and kills him.
Oh!
Tied it together.
The whole dream thing, that's like the biggest faux pas in literature, that it's all a dream.
This isn't literature, this is television.
I would argue against it. No, it's not literature in the same, but it's written with it's extremely detailed, and even in screenwriting they say it. Don't ever have it be a dream. Otherwise, stop jerking me off and like show me something real. Don't have it be a dream.
That's why everyone was upset about Lost. Not because it was a dream, but because kind of was.
Well, it's like none of this really happened, so why did you just make me watch all this? Yeah.
Previously on Lost.
That was good. That was a good addition.
I don't know. I wasn't super into this episode. I was just kind of like.
Why were you not super into this episode?
Last episode was really funny. It was really
maybe
funny.
that's why.
I thought this episode had some really funny lines, though.
Yeah.
Roger had some. I mean, Roger, I think only had one scene, but he crushed it in that scene.
Oh God, he crushed it. I thought this episode was. I liked it better than the first episode because, again, like I had mentioned, to me it seems like ever so subtly they are accelerating where Don Draper's going, and it's done in such a tasteful way in that I don't feel like they're forcing it, but I definitely see he's on a road to somewhere. And I thought even his shirt, I think that this is the first time I've ever seen him wear a colored shirt before. And so you see that the lapels have gotten a little bit bigger, and of course that's just time accelerating. But in this episode, he plays more of a paternal figure, and we've never seen him be a really great dad ever. And he's doing it to, like you said, to Pete and Peggy. When Mathis comes in, he's kind of dad-esque, where he's just like, what do you want me to wipe your ass for you? Like, figure it out, And to me, it seemed like a much more... It's just a different... He's not on the front lines. He's now kind of the general in the back, overseeing things, calling the shots. It seemed a little bit more hands-off. And just because that's so different from what we've seen, it makes me feel like... What are they going to show us in the next episode that he just starts doing?
That's like that thing that he said to Roger that was like, you ever feel like there's less to do but more to think about?
Yes, right. And it seemed like they showed that. And so what does that mean? I don't know. I thought it's intriguing because it's titillating, because it's like they're teasing you. And they're gonna tease you with little breadcrumbs all the way to the end. But what that leads to, who knows?
Well, let's make some predictions for the next episode. The episode ends with Don finding out that he has 30 days to move. I think it's safe to say we'll probably see a jump in 30 days. Where will Don be living?
I actually don't think it will happen, because he has to get that speech done, right?
Oh, so you don't think we'll see the 30-day jump?
No, I feel like it'll end with that. I feel like we're going to have a chunk of time. That 30 days is like kind of the time limit, right, for the whole season. And what will happen, I think, is the speech will happen at an important event. He'll write this like really epic, crazy speech. But it might happen in the last episode, and I think that would be an interesting twist, just like...
It ends with Roger on a beach in the Bahamas giving his Gettysburg Address.
No, I think... Is that where he has to give it?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because it's some sort of corporate retreat.
Maybe.
Was it Bermuda or the Bahamas?
So
I think it was the Bahamas.
maybe it'll be this weird, like, cross thing where you, like, see Roger giving the speech, and then it's just kind of... It's only that audio, and it fades into what's happening in all the characters' lives, and it's like, about a bright future, whatever bullshit thing that'll come up. But, I just can imagine that it'll take a lot of time to clean up kind of... I think it's going to be cleanup time now for the rest of the season. Just cleaning up weird loose edges, kind of pull out a little more of the stitches here and there, and then close it up finally.
Okay.
And then, because that 30-day time limit, once it comes to a close, again, what I mentioned earlier was Peggy will potentially move up into Don's place. Don will disappear as he appeared for us, and everyone should be presumably happy-ish.
Presumably happy.
Question mark?
Katie, what do you think? Do you think we'll see... do you think we'll have a jump in time? Will Don still be trying to figure out... I mean, will the 30 days still kind of be going on? Or do you think we'll jump 30 days and he's already living somewhere else in New York City? Or maybe just temporarily living in a hotel? We see people do that occasionally.
You're giving me too many options. I think we will jump to see him in a new spot in New York. But I think now is a perfect time for him to, move to California or move somewhere different. But I don't know if he would because of his job. I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, he could work in the California office.
With Lou?
Yeah, you're right.
Everyone collectively
No, you know what? He would, he'd go to Lou's office, kill him, get rid of the body, and then take over the office. And assume Lou Avery's identity.
I don't know. Lou would go down fighting. He looks like a little bulldog with the jowls.
Who wins a fight between Lou Avery and Doug Phillips?
Oh God, they're both awful.
I would say definitely. I don't know. Lou Avery, I would think is more ferocious, but Doug Phillips, when he's desperate, I would imagine would fight like a.
Yeah, he's scrappy.
He's scrappy. Yeah. And
he'll take a shit on your couch.
Yeah, I think that Doug Phillips is more likely to play dirty than Lou Avery would. I think that Doug
Lou would
Phillips
just draw it out. He's like,
Lou's got that honorable military history. He'll be like, put up your dukes. And the other guy the other guy would just bite your ear off.
Doug Phillips would pull like a Scar in the Lion King and splash embers into
your eyes.
Lou Avery's eyes.
Long live the king.
Long live the king. I guess I could see it going both ways. I think I could see it, as Sean said, this could be the transition where he goes out as mysteriously as he came in a way. I could also see this be the 30-day notice, the death sentence, where it's like he goes the way that I've been thinking he might, where he just descends into nothingness. I really think Glenn's going to die in Vietnam. I think they're going to kill him because.
So you think we'll hear from Glenn again? Whether it's just a phone call that maybe Glenn's mom calls Sally and says, "Hey, I know you were pen pals. Here's the news."
I absolutely think so. Because the thing is it's what year is this? They say it's
1970.
1970.
1970, right?
That's in the height, because I think my dad was drafted in, I want to say, the late 70s, and he was like, by then the war was kind of cleanup. So to me, it seems completely plausible that Glenn, as terrified as he seemed afterwards, where he's like, "Look, I did this because I hope we'd finally hook up, and I flunked out of school, but now that that's all gone, I guess I'm going to go to war." And then he's like, "You're going to come back. I know it." And he's going to look at his face. I'm like, I'm not going to come back. I think that it would totally be possible that he gets off the plane and boom, dead right away. No, not like he dies of a heart attack. I'm saying that happened, like you get off the plane, all right, let's put you into the field in the first day.
I didn't mean to laugh so much about that.
I thought you meant like they get off the plane and then while they're moving their luggage to wherever the camera, someone's just like, boom, picked them off.
Yeah. I mean, that happened. That happened.
And Sally goes to the wall. It's a future of where Sally's in the future. She's at the wall stenciling his name onto a piece of paper.
I just have to say, Sean makes a delicious kombucha.
He does. Thank you for bringing
delicious.
that. That was swell.
Ladies out there, if you have a chance,
Call it his kombucha. Call it his kombucha.
Call it his kombucha.
Well, on that note, that concludes this week's episode of The Partners Meeting. As always, you can email us at thepartnersmeeting@gmail.com, tweet us using the handle @partnersmeeting, and listen to previous episodes on our website, jbushell.podbean.com. On behalf of Joseph, Sean, and Katie, I'm Aaron Harting saying thanks for listening, but this conversation is a little late, and so am I.